show. I'm Victoria Turner, and this is another episode of Powerful People of San Diego. This is part of the San Diego Vintners Association series, and we have with us today the Secretary and the Educational Chair of the San Diego Vintners Association. We have Steve, who's the Educational Chair.
Good afternoon.
And his beautiful wife, who holds the checkbook, yes, Marilyn.
Welcome. Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about the wineries in San Diego and why our San Diego vintners are different from any other place in the world. And we're going to be talking about WOOFnROSE Winery, which I think is beautifully named, frankly, being a dog person. How did you guys get started in winery?
You know, we both came from the Midwest where beer was the big thing. Anheuser-Busch, Falstaff, a number of breweries back there. So if anybody had told me years ago that I would be making wine one day, I would have asked what they were smoking. But we got out to California, moved out here about 35 years ago. I moved out with my employer, and we got interested in wine. We made a trip up to Napa, and we thought, there's nothing as pretty as a vineyard full of grapevines. And living in Ramona, we had a lot of flammable brush on the property that we knew that the Department of Forestry would like to keep cleared because of fire danger. So we decided we would try planting some grapes. It was basically a landscaping project. And it went awry because they actually grew. And then at that point we had to try to figure out, well, what are we going to do with these grapes? And that it just one thing after another, we planted more grapes, had more need to use them for something, and worked into the winery.
Well, you're one of the oldest wineries in San Diego County for boutiques, right? One
of the older ones. We're kind of the second tier. There was a first tier of wineries that opened years ago. Bernardo Winery in Rancho Bernardo is a historic winery. Then there were several newer ones. There was Schweisdal Winery up in Ramona.
So you really hold the history of how things changed.
Shadow Mountain up in Sunshine Summit. So there were a number of wineries in place at that point in time. It was also a very complicated process to become a winery. You had to go through a lot of different permitting with the county and with the state and everything. And so San Diego County took the initiative to start trying to simplify that and make it easier for small wineries to come into existence.
And
more affordable.
And more affordable.
2009, was that right? About that?
About that time, yeah.
And Diane Jacobs was pushing that, right?
Correct.
And what was the change between the second tier and the current?
Well, the first tier were the old original wineries. Then there was a second tier, which includes us and probably at least a half a dozen more wineries in the Ramona area that followed that, got on that train and became wineries in the 2005, 2006, 2007 area. Now at that point we really weren't allowed to have tasting rooms without going through a lot of permitting. But we could be a wholesale winery, which meant we could make wine and we could sell it you know, to restaurants and things like that. After the tiered winery ordinance went into effect, the thing that allowed us to open our tasting rooms by right of ownership, that's when then the third tier of wineries came in, and it's just mushroomed. There are so many wineries, so many wonderful wineries now in the county. So.
And you've seen it all happen on your watch.
We've watched it all.
Yeah, and the wineries are a humongous economic impact in San Diego. It brings in tens of thousands, what, $1 million?
I don't know. There has been an economic impact study done. It was first done last year, and then it was redone this year. And I know it's been published, the results have been published. I don't remember exactly what the impact is, but it's a very significant revenue for the county.
You have 117 wineries, so that's got to be a big deal. Now, why did you call your winery WOOFnROSE? Go for it. Come on, Marilyn.
Years ago, in my real life, I was secretary at the director of pupil services for the Ramona Unified School District. And most of the ladies in our building were my generation, so our kids were bringing in grandkids,
No.
and everybody went nuts over babies.
Oh.
They quickly learned that if someone came in with a puppy, they needed to come to me first.
Oh.
One of my favorite fragrances in the whole world is puppy breath.
Oh.
So they started nicknaming me Woofy. And when we put in the vineyard, they said, Woofy, you've got to have Woof in the name somewhere, trying to keep us focused on where the direction we were going. So Woof is actually me. He is not Rose. We do have roses around the winery and around the house and on the property. So
I
that's
see.
where the name came from.
I've always wondered how people end up naming their wineries. Okay,
Now,
so
one little anecdote that goes along with that.
Yes.
It's WOOFnROSE. That's WOOF apostrophe N.
okay.
A lot of people think that that's just Woof and Rose, but it can also be WOOFnROSE, a rose that barks.
I love that.
And if you look at the dog that Marilyn drew that's on our
Oh, yeah,
label,
yeah, yeah.
that is our first vineyard dog. She was
Oh.
a beautiful little dog, and so we call her our WOOFnROSE.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? WOOFnROSE, how cute. So I want to talk about how your experiences in running a winery are similar to the new people coming along and how it's different. Well, of course, partly it's different because there's a lot less paperwork and a lot better technology than when you originally started. So talk to the new people who might be considering opening a winery in San Diego County. What should they know?
Actually, there was less paperwork when we started. It's grown a little bit. The San Diego County Tiered Winery Ordinance opened up a lot of opportunities for people to become wineries. There was a learning curve for the wineries and also for the county in trying to determine, exactly how the conditions of the ordinance affected us. There are certain restrictions on boutique wineries in terms of things you can and can't do
What
on
sort
the
of things?
premises. Things like having a large dinner, something like that. It's a difficult line to really draw, but it has to do with whether the activity is involved in selling wine or not.
Ah,
So if you're doing something where you're selling wine, then you can have some different kinds of, I hate to use the word events because that's kind of a sensitive word,
Sure.
but activities. But if you wanted to just out and out have a dinner party and become a restaurant, that probably
You're
would
no
not
longer
be
the winery.
considered proper. So.
right. So that's a fine line to walk, and people have to consider that when they're considering opening a winery. And they have to have fairly deep pocketbooks in order to do that.
That's
The
correct.
land in San Diego is very expensive now, and then buying the grapes themselves. Oh, speaking of which, you have 9 different types of grapes. What types of grapes do you guys have? 9 reds, right?
You want me to
I'm
rattle
gonna
them off?
let
Okay.
Marilyn rattle them off.
Marilyn,
because
rattle them
I'll
off.
forget something.
Our oldest varietal that we planted first when we were doing the landscaping project was our Merlot. That was planted back in 1995.
And why did you start with Merlot?
Because a good friend of ours that owned a winery up in Temecula gave us the cuttings and we stuck them in the ground to see if they would grow.
Whoa, good.
You know, the free is a good thing.
Free is always a good thing.
So after the Merlot, we planted our biggest vineyard, which is our Cab Franc, which we're known for, Cabernet Franc. We have Grenache Noir. We also grow Alicante Bouschet, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere, Montepulciano, and Petit Verdot.
Wow.
I have to picture them in the vineyard. That's how I can remember what they are.
And this is important because you are an estate vineyard, right?
Yes.
Can you explain to our general public here what is an estate vineyard and why is it important to our vineyards in San Diego?
Well, estate means that when you see estate on a label, it means those grapes were grown, processed, bottled, cellared, and everything by the owner of that particular winery. Oddly enough, the federal government will not allow you to put estate on the label unless you are in an American viticultural area, which I will explain
In a minute.
later on.
Yes.
Ramona is an American viticultural area, shortened to AVA, and so most of our red wines are grown on our property. So
So
we can put estate on there.
on there because and you process them as well,
Right.
and you do the tastings of them, and I guess you're vertically integrated. You do everything.
Yes, we do it all.
Now, occasionally we do buy grapes from neighboring vineyards. So far, everything we've ever bought has been in that AVA, but we can't call it an estate if we didn't grow the grapes.
Ah, I see.
And so we have a very small production of Ramona Valley wines, AVA wines, but that are not estate.
I got it. So now can you explain what the AVA is?
American Viticultural Area is, you petition the federal government. And
An area or not, or one person?
Yeah, it has a boundary around it.
Okay.
Ramona Valley goes down to Starvation Mountain, which is off of Highland Valley Road, which to those who not in San Diego County, that doesn't mean a thing. Anyway, but there are specific parameters, boundaries to
an area.
They look for areas that have a certain climatological structure.
Unique to that area.
Typically, they look for soil structures, things like that. Something that makes that area a little different than a piece of land 20 miles down the road. So
you should be able to taste that in the grapes then.
that's the
Theory.
goal.
And that's why we focus on Ramona Valley fruit, because we want to make that American viticultural area have its own characteristics. And the only way the public is going to know what the characteristics are is that they're drinking wine made from grapes grown in that area.
So what are the characteristics of a Ramona?
There is a certain minerality because of the soil.
That's
that
a
comes
big deal
through.
in wine, minerality.
Yeah. Ramona, in general, we're probably what I always say are red rich and white poor. There's a lot of red grapes being grown in our area because Ramona is inland from the coast and the climate is hotter. There are several people that are having success growing some of the white grapes as well. So we're starting to see more and more white come into the area, but still it's a predominantly red wine
Because
region.
that's what grows well. And what's in your soil that adds that minerality?
Well, grapes like
They like almost all kinds of soil, and the thing is, we use rootstocks in many cases to, make sure that the vine matches the soil structure. You can get rootstocks that are good in sandy soils. You can get rootstocks that are good in very dense soils. Ramona tends to have a lot of DG, decaying granite soils, and it's also fairly dry up there. It is semi-arid.
Mediterranean?
So we look for rootstocks that do well in those kinds of soils.
So by rootstock, you mean roots that are developed elsewhere and then packaged and you order them and put them in your area?
That's correct. They find varieties of grape that don't necessarily produce great fruit, but whose roots are very healthy. One thing that you look for is a rootstock that is phylloxera resistant. Phylloxera was a root louse that wiped out French wine production many years ago, and the U.S. was actually integral in solving that problem for France, because they developed rootstocks over here from the native American grapevines, which tended not to be susceptible to that phylloxera louse. And then you take your fruit-bearing varietal and graft it onto that rootstock. So now you've got the best of both worlds. You've got great fruit on top and a great growing vine underneath.
Just like they do in citrus with oranges and lemons, et cetera, et cetera. That's amazing. So what was the biggest surprise to you when you began growing any kinds of vines?
Well, we cleverly retired from our day jobs to do this. Because I told my friends at work, I'm going to have lots of time. I'll have plenty to do, but I can do it when I want to. Well, surprise, surprise, Mother Nature is still in charge. And I do it now when Mother Nature says. So it's really not a by choice thing.
So now you got two wives, apparently.
That's correct.
And for you, what was the biggest surprise in the new industry that you've adopted?
I think the biggest surprise to most folks that go into this business, there is a certain amount of romance. They think, because I get many customers that go, oh golly, if I could just live the life you live. You've got your own vineyard, you've got your own winery, and wouldn't it be wonderful? I think they don't. I always recommend, if you want to do this, go help someone harvest, go help someone do this, so that you know what you're getting into, because otherwise it's a lot of work. And if it's not your passion, you're going to go, oh my word, what in the world have I gotten into, and go running away as fast as you can.
Yeah, well, it's too late. By then they've bought the land, they've
Yep.
invested, everything they own.
Yep, I've had customers that have come in and said, well, can you recommend a good manicurist? And it was right after harvest and press, and my hands were literally purple. And I just held them up and I said, no.
Can you see?
Yeah, there's no percentage in pretty hands if you're going to run a vineyard. You are a farmer.
You are a farmer. So let me ask, who does the tasting and the mixing and the blending when you get to that point?
We do. We do it together. Marilyn is what I actually
And you're
refer
still
to
not,
as
and
my-
you're still married. Wow.
Well, she's my palate. I can take a wine and know whether I like it or not. I can't always say exactly why or why not. Marilyn's the one who can sit there and say, well, this has a lot of raspberry in the finish. It has a raspberry aroma to it, or has the black cherries in it, a really dark fruit type of grape flavor. So we do it together. I kind of do the mechanics of mixing different blends of the wines, and then we taste it, and I say, oh yeah, I like this, and she says, yeah, and it's just a little bit smoky or whatever.
That's marvelous.
And
Yeah.
so then that's how we hone in on our blends.
So, but there's 117 wineries here in San Diego, many of which are couples who run it, but not everybody has her palate. How do they manage to run the winery, stay married, have a life, visit the grandkids, play with the dogs?
A lot of them haven't been in this business long enough.
Well, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's their problem.
And while I can pull out the flavors of wine, Steve is really good if there is a fault in the wine. He can pick out if it's corked, if it's got some different issues. He hones in on that. I can find flavors. He can tell if there's something
Get
wrong.
corrections. I see.
Now we originally we made some small batches of wine. We had a couple of vines up by the house, and when they produced grapes, we thought, well, we'll try making some wine. This was many years ago. 5-gallon quantities.
Sure, that's what people do at home.
It was awful. I had pretty much decided I will never be able to make wine, but I tell people making wine is something like an aquarium. A 5-gallon aquarium, when the water starts to go bad, you may as well dump the fish and start over. But when you've got a 59-gallon barrel of wine, you've got some ballast there and some stability. And a lot of times if you catch something that's starting to go wrong with it, you can go in and take care of it and make corrections.
If you're smart enough and you're skilled enough and you're intelligent enough,
And you know what you're looking for.
and you know what to do, and you've done it before, that makes a huge difference. But you didn't have those skills when you first started.
No, that's true, but we had a couple of good friends in the valley that were already making wine and were making some very good wine, and they were more than happy to share their experience and expertise.
And that leads directly to the San Diego Vintners Association, of which you're the secretary and you're the education chair. So what do you guys do at these meetings every month when all the vintners show up, or a certain percentage of them?
Well, we have board meetings the week before the general meeting, and then when we have a general meeting where the entire membership is invited, and it's not just wineries that are members. We also have associate members who are either growers or have trades that directly affect the wine industry. So we've got different angles, different interests coming together. Anyway, we meet together. It's a business meeting, but it's also, we usually have a speaker. We usually have we've been having our one of our member wineries host one each month, so that the membership can go to a different winery, see how they do things, and we have different levels of winery. Steve and I are what's bottom level, boutique winery, little bitty guys. But there are urban wineries. There are wineries that don't necessarily have their own vineyards. They purchase their grapes elsewhere or from vineyards in the area or somewhere else that they make their wine from. Then there's the different levels. Some that have the major use, the big ones like Orfila, that can do all the things that we can't do.
Resource driven, yeah.
Right. So we meet. We talk, the winery introduces itself, talks about themselves, then we'll have speaker. Steve will sometimes do educational seminars that
Typically, I'll bring in, somebody.
Yeah.
We've got a consultant that works with Scott Labs, one of the supply processors up north, and he travels around a lot and will come in and do a presentation on a subject. We've got local members who have expertise in certain areas, and they'll come in.
Don't you invite the general public to come as well?
Not typically, only people who are interested in joining. Basically because we are having the meetings in member wineries locations, and a lot of those locations really are not big enough to accommodate large crowds.
Wait till the fundraiser.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful having you here. We're in the last couple of minutes. Once again, we're here with Marilyn and Steve Kahle, who are respectively the secretary and the education chair of the San Diego Vintners Association. And is there a last thing that you would like to say?
Well, it's really phenomenal the way this industry has taken off here in San Diego. The number of wineries and the number of people in San Diego who are interested in the wineries. And I tell people I love doing this job because I keep learning new things. And a lot of times I learn new things from very experienced wine drinkers who come in as customers. Other times I'll learn something new from a complete novice. We had a customer a couple of years ago who asked me about tartaric acid. We use tartaric acid sometimes in blending the wine and establishing a good acid balance. And he said, well, where does tartaric acid come from? And my first thought was, well, from Vintner's Vault, of course. Where else would you go buy it? But I knew what he was asking is, where does it come from? And I didn't know. It's basically a byproduct of fermentation. So it's not something that's manufactured in a lab somewhere. But it was something very interesting. I spent 2 hours out on the internet researching
it up.
that.
You heard it here first,
So
folks.
I learn something like that, all the time.
That's exciting, educational, so to speak. And Marilyn, what have you learned? What would you like the general public to know?
Well, I would like to thank you all for having us. One of the things, because we have been doing this for a number of years, and we take our wines to various charity events, partly just to get the word out that there's a winery. Most folks, even after 20 years of serving wine at events, will go, I didn't know there were wineries in San Diego. So I thank you very much for getting the word out that there is a very fastly growing, robust industry here in San Diego. Winery industry that we would like everybody to start trying and see what San Diego has available.
Because there's so many different types of wine here.
Yes, there are. There is, in San Diego County in general, which is bigger than the American viticultural area, is there's so many different microclimates. There isn't a grape, I don't think, that could not be grown successfully in this county. Amazing.
Well, I'm so glad that you guys could be here. Thank you for being with us here at Powerful People of San Diego with our two powerful people here on our Vintner series. And we'll see you here next week for another exciting member.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is 1 Minute, 1 Vineyard, and my name is Marilyn Kahle. I am the secretary for the San Diego County Vintners Association, as well as co-owner of WOOFnROSE Winery, a winery in the Ramona Valley AVA, which is American viticultural area, here in San Diego County. What I wanted to talk to you about today is that San Diego is where wine in California began. Most people think of wine in California as Napa and Sonoma up north, but in actuality, as the missionaries were moving in from Mexico and moving north, they started in San Diego and moved all the way up to Northern California, planting vineyards as they went along. That is where the vineyards have come, and now we have a resurgence of vineyards here in the San Diego area, and a beautiful, booming wine industry that we hope everyone will enjoy trying the wines from the different regions here in the San Diego area. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Mike and Linda McWilliams from San Pasqual Winery, here with fun facts about wine in San Diego County.
So, did you know that San Diego County has the most varied growing zones or climate zones than any other county in the nation? So when people look to San Diego County to say, well, what varietal, what grape grows specifically here, we can do them all. It just depends on where you are in the county. So San Diego County is about diversity.
This has been Mike and Linda McWilliams with San Pasqual Winery, here with 1 Minute, One Winery.
I'm Babs with Away Home for Animals and wanted to talk to you for a minute about Gracie. She is a dog that we rescued off the streets and had no owner come forward, and she is available for adoption. She's a 5 to 7-year-old spayed female pit bull. She is great with dogs, great with people, would be okay with children. She has a great play energy, but is also very content to be a couch potato, as you can see. And she can be met by calling 619-249-2221.